responsible for ensuring that folks who are in security sector then take responsibility for the things that they're supposed to be doing. And who am I talking about? I'm talking about the police. All right, so we're getting into a conversation this morning. At this point, kind of like what I've told you before, is the Executive Director Imlu and convener of the PRWGK. She'll tell us what that is. Wangechi Kahuria is here with us this morning. A very good morning to you, Wangechi.
Good morning, and thank you for having me.
How are you doing?
Very well, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
That's a lovely kimono.
Oh, thank you.
I have to say.
I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you for being here. We're looking into police individual and command responsibility this morning and asking ourselves a certain number of questions in terms of what does this look like? When do we ask for individual responsibility and when do we ask for command responsibility? Mm-hmm. But we'll get into that in just a minute. Our proverbs this week are from a country that actually, because a lot of traditions I love. Mm-hmm. Dennis will tell you what that is, and we'd love to hear your interpretation.
So today, the country she's talking about is Mali. Mm-hmm. And you think about Mali, remember Mansa Musa, the wealthiest person to have ever walked the face of the earth. Why? Because of the gold deposits that does exist in Mali today. Unfortunately, regardless of the fact that they have all this gold, there is also political instability that has stopped the country from realizing the good things that the country could have because of the resources that they do have. But that notwithstanding, I'll walk from here to Timbuktu and that phrase, right? Mm-hmm. Timbuktu is actually in Mali. Mm-hmm. And why is it important? Because it is a center of knowledge for Islamic studies that came back and many scholars came to gain their knowledge from. The proverb, interesting. A fly perched on the scrotum is gently nudged off, never struck. How would you interpret it?
It's gently struck off.
It's gently nudged off.
Nudged off, not struck off. Does it speak to proportionality?
Interpretation is yours and it's never wrong.
I guess it sounds the same as, you don't use a hammer to kill a mosquito. Mm-hmm. I would sort of mm-hmm. interpret it that way. Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah. I hope I'm not too far off.
Proverb for a proverb. Well interpreted. Asante sana.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Choose your force.
Yes.
And in terms of what you're going to create in terms of damage later, you might want to recognize that earlier.
Absolutely.
Okay, so when we look at individual responsibility and command responsibility as concerns the police, of course, IMLU being the independent medical legal unit, and looking at a lot of issues around conduct of the police, there have been certain questions. There are a number of cases that are in trial at the moment. There are a number of questions that are being asked in terms of when this person did this, when somebody shot someone. Did they have the responsibility as an individual, or were they taking orders and then cannot be blamed for that? When Albert Ojwang, for example, is murdered in a police cell, and what we're hearing is that the orders came from above, the person who gave the order, the person who actually landed the blow, who takes responsibility, or who are we asking should take responsibility, or does it depend?
Thank you. Let me first situate the legal framework and how we operate and how the country is run. So we have the Constitution of Kenya, which is paramount for every person. And therefore, to begin with, police officers, first and foremost, are legally accountable to the Constitution of Kenya and the rule of law. And then we have the legal frameworks, the National Police Services Order, the Services Standing Orders, SSOs, the international instruments. There are various acts of parliament that define different things. So what police officers should know and what Kenyans should know is that a police officer can never say that I took instructions from somebody else, because first and foremost, they are trained, they understand the Constitution, they are aligned to the Constitution, and they uphold themselves to the Constitution. So when an order is given, the first question is, and there's a guidance on how to sort of tease out what you need to do. So the first question any officer should ask themselves is, number one, is it lawful? Number two, and if you're talking lawful, does it fit within the constitutional and the legal framework that we've spoken to? Is it provided for in the Constitution? What does the Constitution say?
Okay.
And then where is the order coming from? The orders come from your command, your supervisor. The command or the supervisor has some core responsibilities. One is take charge and control over their team. Two is act within reasonable command and force. So you ask yourself, do I have the knowledge about certain things? What does the law say about it? So the same premise, right? And then number three, act in every possible way to prevent, one, a crime from occurring, or a violence or an unconstitutional matter from occurring, and or if it happens, then report it, investigate it, and ensure that the due process takes place. So that is the simplified command system. So ask yourself, is it legal? Is it constitutional? Where is it coming from? So the issue, and I hear this a lot, that we took orders from above. Fine. There are mechanisms of saying, if this is unconstitutional, I cannot take it. We do know that the police service is a disciplined force. So the minute we step out of that space of discipline, the space that calls for professionalism, remember lives, safety of Kenyans, rule of law, prevention of crime, protection of life and property is under the hands of the law enforcement system, which is the National Police Service. So the minute we step out of that, we get into very risky waters. So the issue of command coming from somewhere else can never be used as an excuse. It is not acceptable. It is not within the confines of law.
Right. At least that sets the pace for us to begin understanding the path we must, and I say must, embark on to make sure that these symbiotic relations between the police and the citizen and all other organs works out and works out for the common good.
Right.
Now, this is not the first time we are having Kenyans, when I say we, I mean Kenyans, we the people, are having challenges with our relationship with the police, whether they were called the police force or the police service. It's not the first time.
Sure.
And unfortunately, the conflict that we've had with the institution of the police, of the disciplined forces, has resulted to loss of life, which cannot be replaced. Therefore, it behooves each and everyone today who is in a position of influence or understanding to make sure that we are able to protect any loss of life and damage of properties. Now, when you look at what you call best practice, because every now and then we are saying we are benchmarking. We are trying to improve on service provision to our citizenry based on what we are home growing and what we are also importing. What are we missing as a nation? Because the conversation I feel that we never talk about. We come here and say police are misbehaving, or the people are provoking, somebody is not is neglecting their duties. But what are we missing as a nation, as a country, to foster a working police service?
Interesting question, very, very complex question, I must say. But I'm glad that you asked it, because these are the kind of questions we as Kenyans must begin speaking about and with each other. One of the things you've talked about is what I call the trust deficit between the people and those that keep them safe. And we need as Kenyans first to appreciate that this is a disciplined force. It is paid for by our taxes. However, it has key responsibilities and mandates, and it functions in a certain way. Given that kind of understanding, we also have a responsibility to work with the police service. That's why it's a people service. It's meant to be a service, not a force. And I know the difference has never been clear because the behaviors and habits have not changed. However, from the people, our responsibilities are, one, to understand their role and how the police should conduct themselves. When we have that understanding, we are placed better to engage them. Number two is to track and also report incidences. All right. And then number 3, which is really critical, especially in the area of work that I work on, around human rights and freedoms from torture, prevention of torture, enforced disappearances, extrajudicial killings, is if, for example, we have the protest that people utilize as a right to express themselves, there is a code of conduct that has been set for the rights holders, the people themselves. You're notifying the different offices, you're being organized and going onto the streets, following the routes that you have planned for, behaving in a certain way. And we know that Kenyans, when you actually talk about protests, Kenyans have been peaceful protesters. What has happened, and I really believe in that because I've been on the streets and because a lot of people I engage are on the streets as peaceful protesters. What happens is that we now allow, and the police system allows, infiltration through hired goons, through criminal gangs that come and infiltrate. So the responsibility of the Kenyan at that point is obviously to report this and make sure that it reaches the ears of the security enforcement. Yeah. But then for the security service, the police force, because they're the people with authority, power, and control, they have a bigger responsibility and a bigger mandate and are accountable to the people of Kenya and to the Constitution. And so they must behave in the way they are expected to behave. And that is defined in the standing orders. It is defined in the Constitution. It is defined in the different acts. And so one of the ways that they can actually start building that trust within people, one, is being responsible for their actions. For example, when there's an extrajudicial killing, do not cover it up. Ojwang's case, which you've just mentioned, is a classic case. Somebody is arrested on the 6th of June. On the healthy. On the 8th of June, the person dies. And the person has died, is killed. Thank you. Is killed in a confined space, a holding cell. Now, the police, and what we have seen, this is an ongoing case, but allow me to just speak about it because it's in the public domain. Now, the police, not one person, several people work together to cover it up. That means even saying that I was under instructions has completely gone out of the way. You're willfully, consciously, intentionally concealing a crime. That makes you a criminal yourself at that very point. So all these people, and it's not one person, so you can imagine how much effort it took for them to sort of come up with cleaning the scene of crime. The police are number one supposed to protect the scene of crime. So that holding cell was a scene of crime at that point. Ojwang himself, the late, his body was a crime scene. It was tampered with, So I don't know what kind of training we keep talking about to do the right thing. So that's one of the things. So don't conceal evidence, don't tamper. It is practical. It is so simple in the books. If you read the services standing orders, it is so clear. Number 2, the supervisor and supervisors. So if it's your supervisor who ordered you to clean, then use your conscience and report, whether it's during, if you're not able to at that point, report after to the supervisor of the supervisor and say, this is what I was asked to do, report it. Remember, we have investigative arms that are provided. We have the Internal Affairs Unit, we've got IPOA, we've got the National Police Service Commission, each with distinct roles in terms of the investigative orders and the actions they can take. So there is a process of reporting. We also talk of whistleblowing, for example. There are so many mechanisms that you can use to report crime. So don't lie to yourself that because an order was given, you're not criminally responsible and liable. In fact, you can see from the officers now, they're in court alone, and it will catch up with them. So you're going to go in for murder simply because you took an order that was unlawful and you knew it, you did not report, you actually committed a crime, and the crime now is murder. So there are many processes and there are many things one can do.
Wangechi, as you've just painted, what then the responsibility of a police who's supposed to implement an order should do, there is also the understanding of a country that we are in, where the country that we are in, many would say there is a police capture. Police are supposed to capture offenders and bring them to justice, right? But in this case, we're talking about police capture by the political class. Because every other time, even as late as yesterday, during the arrest of MP Kahuria, being told that there were orders from above.
Yeah.
And that in its own self paints a picture of a police service that is not operating as per the law, as per the constitution or the standing orders, because they are captured in one way or the other. I'll also give you another example of the OCS Central, when he released all the arrested demonstrators and said there was no crime here. What did we see? He was arrested and later transferred. So when we talk about the management of police officers and even the command responsibility, one would say that the big honchos in the cadre are always left to do what it is they want to do, and it is the junior officers who take the blame. Because even the Ojwang case, there is a senior officer who's been mentioned time without number, yet they're still out here. So how are we managing? Is it that the law does not apply to everybody?
It's a very sad situation that, unfortunately, all the time what we have seen is that junior officers are the ones who face the law. And indeed, what you're saying is true. There is capture. We are Kenyans. I'm a Kenyan. I know it. I have seen it. There is capture of not just, the police service itself, but also other institutions that have oversight, mandates. And so that places Kenya in a very difficult place. But the question is, why do we have persons in leadership positions allowing themselves to take up a responsibility and oversee an institution or a national constitutional institution, but under instructions of the executive? It is not right. And one of the things that the police service is supposed to be is independent. That is a very big responsibility of the police. It's actually supposed to be an independent service. The Inspector General of Police is independent. He should make his independent decisions. And actually, the chain of command is that it goes back to the Inspector General of Police. So he cannot, and I'm using he because the person sitting in that office now is a he. He cannot use the excuse of I was given instructions. From where, by who? That's your office, right? And so the question of independence is worrying. The oversight mandates, when they do the investigations, they should be clear. Because it leads to a certain level of command. The command could be at station level, command could be at county level, sub-county, whatever it is. That command is defined. So what does the justice mechanism do? So I think institutions have to start not just working together, but delivering based on their mandates. And they need to remember that they are not employed by the executive. They're employed by the people of Kenya. And I keep saying, and I don't think it goes very far, but anyway, it is a fact. At the end of the day, you leave a legacy. The office you hold. What do your children, what are you telling your children? What will they be saying their mother, their father, their sister, their dad did when they were in that office? What legacy are you carrying? And for the police service, the biggest issue is also not just what they do, but the perception of what Kenyans see and uphold of the police service to be. You did raise again the issue of the service from the force. One of the things we are contending with right now and really struggling with, is the issue of excessive use of force, arbitrary arrests, the kind of decisions you've talked about. Somebody who plays his rightful role and duty being punished for doing good. What kind of a country punishes good? He only did what was right. The arrested persons had no case to answer. And I'll tell you, a lot of the protesters who are arrested, when they're taken to court, because we are there frontline, most of them are never charged with anything.
They are released.
They are never charged. They are released after. Those that are charged, it's flimsy charges, which don't hold water. And so why go all this way to curtail a fundamental freedom that is provided for? That's the thing. And so we are running Kenya backwards. We are getting back into an authoritarian, autocratic country when we fought for democracy, freedoms, rule of law, human rights, So it's all about power, and it's very unfortunate. And I don't know whether I've answered your question, comprehensively.
Yeah. I want to come to the independence that you mentioned, because you mentioned the OCS, for example, who was then, what happened to him? Was he transferred somewhere else?
She was arrested.
After being arrested first, of course. And of course, we had people outside the police station demanding for his release.
Yes, and I thank Kenyans
and
for
even
that.
offering to pay bail.
But there he stood, and he showed that really independence is yours.
Yes.
That you can actually decide that you will live out this independence. So for the people who do not, do we say that they have power, or are they weak? You mentioned that folks in the service are subservient to the Constitution first. Well, it doesn't appear so. There seems to be a very real fear, because it's not reverence, for those who are in command above them.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't an Inspector General of Police, for example, not live out the independence that office guarantees him, not suggests, guarantees that you're independent, to say, this is going wrong, let's do something about it. Come on, boys, we're not going to shoot anybody today, but we're just going to maybe protect them and allow them to protest. Are they really subservient to the Constitution?
Unfortunately, I don't know why those decisions are being made. I can't speak for them, but I've been in conversations with the IG himself, including in a meeting that we had just last week. And the law is very clear.
Oh, come on.
And they know what they're supposed to do. In fact, when you speak to the IG himself, he really is and commits to ensuring that people are not shot when they go to the streets. That, there's the police actually escort and allow people to demonstrate or to picket. I prefer calling it picketing, because they're actually going out there to present a petition for change, right? Yeah. So it's not like any of this is not known. But the question you ask is a question we're all struggling with. What is so difficult for the IG to be independent? His tenure is guaranteed within the Constitution. So at times I call it personal choices. And again, because the Constitution and the standing orders that I've been speaking to give him the responsibility, and actually the big word, the accountability over everything that happens is under him.
Allow me to ask, Wangechi, in your experience as a Kenyan, with this new police service, have you had an arrested person, a suspect, being read their rights anywhere in this country? That we are arresting you on suspicion of this and that, you have the right to, as enshrined in our Constitution?
Of course not.
Okay.
Even further, before a police officer uses his weapon, two key things are supposed to happen before that. Number one, there's clarity on when you can use your weapon. Only when there is danger to the person.
Or to...
Yes, you're defending, or there's danger to somebody, right? The first thing you do after you de-escalate, you actually state that I am giving you a warning. You don't just shoot.
So before even the shooting, because you may even imagine that for a shootout to happen, emotions are running high. It's a highly escalated situation. But we have basic, even civil cases where somebody maybe needs to be arrested. Sometimes even there is no need for arrest. One just basically needs to be summoned to a police station or a police, or even to a chief's office, depending on the matter. How is it that we have deviated so far from that basic practice? Because when you talk about, you spoke about proportionality earlier, those are highly escalated situations that, of course, do not end well for the person who is now being sought after. But when we have deviated so far from the basic principles of policing, that for some time, like we saw that member of parliament who was in some radio station, and the proportionality of force applied towards his arrest, you would say it was not appropriate. When persons are basically whisked away and put in a van and taken to a police station without their rights being read to them, when someone is not summoned just to basically show up and explain themselves and then face the rule of law. How do we even begin to talk about proportional use of force during protests?
The first question they ask is it necessary? The action we are taking, is it necessary? Is it reasonable? Is it proportional?
And what defines those three things? Necessity, rational, proportional, and reasonable.
Whatever it is
the law.
It is a law. It is not. It is a law defined in law. And very clear. And people are trained on it. So you don't just use your personal. You wake up and decide, I am issuing an order to do XYZ. By the way, even before you go to the streets, before the police go to the streets, they have their briefing.
Yes.
Their objectives. How will you crowd control? If this happens, how will you de-escalate?
Do you think they have those conversations? Like, for example, during the protests in 2024, do you think they had a conversation and said, okay, this is happening, even if they had to regroup and come back later and said, okay, this is how we're going to deal with it? Do you think they had a conversation and said, okay, fine, if things get haywire, we're going to shoot and we're going to kill?
I'm not sure, but I don't think they have them, because we are seeing, remember the protests in 2023?
Yeah.
People died, 2024. Last year, we reported 105 deaths, total 85 from the protest, 20 were within police and other places of holdings, detention places. Now we are hitting almost 100 as we speak, right? So I don't think they have these conversations. And if I don't know why they don't have them. And if they have them, they're not utilizing their training and the provisions in the call of duty. Because when you are out there, you're not out there as Wangechi. You're not out there as yourself. You're out there as an officer of the law. You're an officer taking responsibility to manage the crowds or to enhance peace or to ensure that there's no crime happening on behalf of the government as a police officer. So you don't go out there and mete out your own actions.
No.
So what you're asking is a very difficult question to answer. They're supposed to have those briefings and they agree on how they move. Now, how the weapons move from point A to B, it's all recorded. We know that.
Yes.
There's no weapon that moves from the armory to the person it's all recorded. So you cannot even say, and they used to say this, we don't even know who shot XYZ. I mean, there's a clear command chain. That's why we are discussing the command. There's a clear storage chain, custody chain, everything. So the questions around independence, the questions around being overwhelmed do not come in. De-escalation tactics are very, very clear. So by the time somebody is, this image, by the time police officers are pulling and dragging this person with disabilities on the ground, what threat had that person posed to them? Yeah. Right? What threat was that person to fellow Kenyans? So it's not about threats. It's not about it. It's just bad behavior.
So could it be that we are not, because we keep training our officers every year, and we have good officers for the sake of argument. We do have good officers
very good
out there.
Yeah.
But could it be that someone or our system has chosen to weaponize and politicize? Because by and large, instances where we have complaints are highly related to political activities. So you realize the political players, in one way or the other, find a way, either because they're the appointing authority or they're the paying, because they're not the hiring authority. The hiring authority is the constitution. And even the paying authority is the Kenyan through our taxes.
Absolutely. Yes.
But could it be that some people have found it fit to weaponize, to politicize the police service, generally speaking? And if that is the case, that we're able to see it that way, how do we start having this separation of powers now? Because we've had a problem for far too long. And we cannot allow it to continue the way it is. We must demand and be part of the change that we want. How do we begin enforcing the separation of powers where where you politicians, you the clergy, you the citizen, and you the police, everybody assumes their mandate and execute it accordingly, in hope that we'll bear now institutional responsibility and individual responsibility. How do you begin to enforce that from where you stand, from the interventions that you're offering, from the research and data you have gathered? What are our entry points into beginning to realize the separation of powers?
I couldn't have said it better, that we all have a duty and responsibility to ensure that the separation of power. And as we discuss the separation of power, let me borrow your words about weaponization of the service. That is what has happened. Completely weaponized, if we want to pass a message to Kenyans, we use the police service. If we want to push somebody into an elective position, we use the service. We saw it in Olkalau, we've seen it. It's, every Kenyan knows what is happening. So one of the things that I want to push for and I think brings the citizen forward is playing an active role in monitoring, tracking, and reporting. We have community policing committees, which are not functional everywhere, but it is a structure that is available. One of the things citizens can do, and we have very active human rights defenders on the ground who are under threat all the time, including civil society organizations like ours, under the threat intimidation all the time. However, citizens can actually, and this is a time to wake up and track, report, so that we can have an analysis of stations, for example, that are notorious for use of excessive force, notorious for deaths in detention within the holding cells, that are notorious for human rights abuses. So it starts there. We report, we track, we monitor, we are actively engaged. We don't keep quiet. We use social media, we use all the spaces, because we know that in as much as the executive does not listen, things are being documented.
But we're taking a break.
A quick one. Let's take a break, and then we'll come back and continue this conversation.
Okay.
Whether it's individual responsibility or command responsibility, which we'll be looking at this morning in terms of the police service in this country, and how we're going to, I guess, take steps moving forward. We'll be back with Wangechi Kahuria after this short break.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.
Our total to deal now, if they will not be disciplined by their parents, we will, that is the tone that has been set at the top. That combined together with what it is we're seeing, the case of Albert Ojwang, and then again the DIG being there. You look at all these court orders not being respected again, another DIG who is in this mix. What does that do to Kenyans trusting and believing that the police will offer security?
As I address the issue of the tone, let me just finish off on what needs to be done. So there are two critical issues I wanted to add. One is the role of investigations and how, the investigative agencies as well need to be independent, need to conduct timely investigations. But then there's a bigger blockage, and the bigger blockage is prosecution. The prosecution is honestly not doing its job when it comes to prosecuting officers who have been found culpable, because investigations indicate that there's a case to answer. So when that doesn't happen, and so there also has to be disciplinary action on some of these people. However, the judicial system is also available, and we did go to court over that issue. Now, when The head of state also makes such a comment that shoot the legs. Our organization, IMLU, has documented cases of persons who've died that were not shot anywhere else but on the leg.
The Rex Masai.
Yeah, and they died because an injury has a way it works on the body. And it's just, again, an irresponsible comment. What does it show? It shows, number one, you're overstepping your mandate. You're actually telling the police how to conduct their affairs. And then police officers get confused. You know, the state, the head of state, the CS has said this. So who do we follow? Do we follow the law? Do we follow these pronouncements? And so
I just think it's ludicrous that we have to think between the two. Like, okay, so there's the Constitution, which is the sovereign, law, and then this person who said it. And if I can just segue into that with a question then and say, I think we're talking about things that that will remain unchanged until a system is changed. Is that what we're looking at? That people have got to go. That the way of doing things, the modus operandi, has to change. If the system doesn't change, IMLU will continue having these conversations for years. We'll continue talking about, let's see if we can, let's encourage, let us adopt, let us reform. But until the DNA of these operations changes, I'm sorry to be a Debbie Downer, but until the DNA changes, we will continue to suffer from this disease.
And that DNA has to change with the people on the ground. So the police officer, whether we are calling him junior, senior, that person who's charged with that responsibility needs to be held accountable for his actions, no matter where.
Who do they follow? When in this Kiganjo where they all go, we can talk about physical training and all of that, but I would assume that the majority of the training that takes place in that place is psychological. Where somebody tells you, you can say police service, you can call it police force, you can call it police cartel, whatever it is that you want to call it. But at the end of the day, what is ingrained in the mind of this individual, by the time they come out of their 9 months, akin to a baby being born, right? It's already been ingrained here. So we can talk about reform, we can talk about command responsibility, but that's what I'm talking. Is it not systemic?
It's systemic. It's systemic. But actually, the training, because I've looked at the police training manual, it does not talk about use of violence.
Of course it doesn't talk about it, but what's on and isn't that what has plagued this country for the longest time?
Exactly.
That what's on paper and what is in action are two totally different things.
Because people are loyal to people, to commanders, not to the Constitution, not to Kenyans, not to the rule of law. So it is about your loyalty. Where does it fall? And that's what we are saying. Loyalty can never be under the command. It should be for the Constitution. And so that's why we insist that both the command chain and the individual are liable and should be compelled to take responsibility for their actions or their omissions. Remember, omission is also
commission.
Exactly, it's also commission. So it's both. And so the question, and that's why the roles of the oversight institutions can never be overemphasized. If IPOA is playing its rightful role, if IAU plays its rightful role, if the National Police Service Commission plays its rightful role and disciplines officers, because there's a very well articulated disciplinary action. If they discipline officers who commit crime, not punish those who protect the Constitution, then it would be a very different country.
On that different country building, which I still believe we can and we will, and we shall as a people.
We shall. The people shall.
Yes. How do we cater for the good police officers? Because, oftentimes, the good ones will say, I don't want to act because I'll lose my job.
Or be transferred
to another hardship area. So that kind of, breeds complacency. So how do we, because simple psychology is about reward and punishment.
True.
If you want behavior to change, just reward the good behavior, punish the bad behavior.
True.
We have enough bad to talk about, but we have some good that we are not really fostering, in my opinion.
Yeah.
What perhaps interventions or approaches or ideas can we employ to start rewarding these good officers? Like we saw compliance of the police in the just concluded general election when they allowed the public to just frisk them, to eliminate the element of threat. Now, so what do we do about the good policemen who will have now the confidence, knowing that when I stand within the confines of the law, I am safe as a person, my tenure of work is equally safe? What do we do? Or what are we doing currently?
What we're doing is this conversation we are having right here, that the media is working with the people, is informing, is educating the people. It's working with institutions like ours. It's working with independent oversight.
Are you saying in quotes?
I'm saying in quotes, because the important thing, and I like what you're doing now, why the media and these kind of conversations are important is that you alert people, you educate people on what is provided for. I engage a lot of people who believe that police is power. Can never, actually you see a police officer, you run for your dear life, you hide, But when we engage, people begin to understand, I have a right actually to report this police officer. Get their service number, report them. And that's why you can see now what the behavior and the narrative that is changing is that they hide their identity. Because they know they're doing wrong, they don't want to be identified, right? So there are mechanisms to report this, and we work together. Now, changing behavior is a difficult thing, but it has to be done. And it is done through use of law and enforcement of the law. So what has been ailing Kenya is a lack of enforcement. Because, again, the law is clear, provisions are clear, but the system does not enforce the law, whether it is now what you're saying, to award good behavior or to punish bad behavior. Awarding good behavior can be a people-led thing. Why don't we identify officers, stations? In fact, there's a program we are running as IMLU, where we are beginning to identify officers, and actually this suggestion was made from one of the units in the police service, the reforms discussions that we were having. And they said, same question, you always bash us. And we said, we don't bash you. We just present the cases as they are. So
if you feel that you feel bad, then perhaps you should check it out, right?
Exactly, So we said, we will come up with an initiative where we are recognizing either a station or an officer, like the central police officer should be awarded by the people. But they don't have to be awarded by the police service. It's a people power. Sovereignty power belongs to the people.
Right.
So imagine if the people themselves came up with this kind of a process and identified all those officers who go out of their way to ensure constitutionalism, who safeguard the rule of law, who are trying to work towards ending impunity, making sure that cases like Ojwang's came to the light. And it was a people-driven process, So that is one of the things. And I'm telling you, people-driven processes are sustainable.
Correct.
And they can create change. But they will not work alone if we all don't push behind the people and support the people. So organizations like IMLU, Kenya Human Rights, all these civil society organizations, our collection of evidence, preservation of evidence, presenting it in court, working with advocates, lawyers, LSK, all these players to make sure that we have watertight cases, presenting them to court, and we are working with IPOA, IAU, all those people. And then making sure that the judiciary does not let Kenyans down. Why are cases taking forever in court? Yesterday, the Kianjakoma brothers case, I got calls from Embu, and people are saying, why is this case taking so long? Why they're even blaming us for letting them down. And we are at pains to say we are not the judiciary. We are not the ones, but there has to be fast tracking of cases. What is an acceptable timeline to adjudicate a case, to finalize a case? Because, again, impunity is what is breeding contempt.
Right.
It is what is aiding officers to become complacent because they know it never happened to somebody, it will never happen to me. But I remind all of us, myself included, that my actions today will still hold me, will enable me be held accountable 20 years from today. So don't forget that you're in office today. tomorrow you may not be a police officer, or whoever is protecting you will not be in that powerhouse.
Wangechi, one thing that as well stands out is if you look at the 2010 Constitution, initially, the appointment of the IG was never really the work of the president at the time. It was the Police Service Commission that would then sit and decide on who then is fit. Talk about the independence that was there. But then again, an act of parliament is passed. It's called the Duale Act, right? That then gave the president an oversight or a view or to be involved in one way or the other. And many say that even the appointment of the IG, the independence of the IG has been taken away. Why? Because the president has a stake on the appointment of the individual who sits as the IG. Would you reckon then if the independence of the police or the appointment reverts back to the Police Service Commission, they're allowed to do their job, and anyone who sits there, would you reckon that would give police the independence that they actually do deserve?
Of course, absolutely. The appointment is a big issue. The final and the perception of who the appointing authority is. Now, the National Police Services Commission has the overall responsibility for appointment. That should be. Yes. But we've seen, of course, the current scenario is that the president makes the final decision. So that doesn't aid in any way, because your loyalty then begins to be aligned to the presidency, which shouldn't be. Of course, there has been political wars between the National Police Service Commission, the National Police Service itself, and other structures. And obviously, if we had an independence in the appointment, it would make a very big difference. It would make a very big difference, because then the powers that be, although we know that they can also not be the appointing officers, but they will still capture. Because capture is about power. It's about influence. It's about money. I mean, it's about corruption also. Let's be honest, Money changes hands, obviously, right? So we know that capture is about many other different things. So you may fail to appoint, but you can still capture. However, I think the bigger thing is around the conscience of the person, the mandate that the Constitution upholds, and then the appointing authority to put its feet down and ensure that they do their rightful duty.
Now, as we come to the top of the hour, there's another arm of policing that we never talk about. Perhaps it's because millions of us Kenyans are accomplices to the crimes they commit every day. And in my opinion, this is the traffic department. And this is how I qualify my statement. Every day, even right now, go to any road, you will see police, traffic police, stopping a PSV vehicle. We know they collect money.
They shake hands.
They shake hands. Like, I think they do a visual inspection of the vehicle and the people being ferried, and the vehicle goes. But over and over again, we've heard that some of the motor vehicles have proceeded to cause an accident. And we have had loss of life. This has become sort of a culture. So I'm trying to also shift our focus from those heinous crimes where there is violence and shootout and all that, and standoff and brutality, either in holding cells or otherwise, but also to look at the basic values that we employ in policing ourselves and the people who police us. How do we, because we spoke about citizenry-led behavioral change. There was a time in this country where people were arresting traffic officers for collecting bribe, but that has come and gone. There's a behavior that was left behind by the late President Kibaki about dumping. Rarely will you see people dumping in the city. Maybe in some areas, but there is that culture of I take care of my garbage. And that has, in one or the other, transformed the city. So how do we grow to not just participating from the corruption itself, but also saying, no, this should not happen? Can people in a Matatu say, do not give that traffic officer money? If there is a problem, allow yourself to be arrested as a driver, as the passenger, and then face the
law. That's what the Kenya desire should be. The Kenya desire is where I take responsibility for my actions. I'm driving fast, I'm misbehaving, I'm overlapping. I know I shouldn't do those things. So I stop. Number one. that we have a bad behavior also. Number two, this bribery thing, it starts with that Matatu person, and they, as you've said correctly, they give, these days they don't even shake hands. I'm told they just place it on a window. This person passes and picks it up. You never capture it, right? So that behavior, and why are you doing this? Just to make an extra round, or just to be let off with an unroadworthy vehicle? So again, the partnership between media, the people, and all these players in the middle of educating people and agreeing collectively as Kenyans, let's change our behavior for a better Kenya tomorrow. Because we've lost far too many people on the roads. We are teaching our children behavior that is not acceptable. Violence, the way of doing things is through bribery. It's corruption. I can never get a job if I don't, money doesn't pass hands through some, So if we, and this is a time we saw with Ol Kalau, defending the ballot. The people can, the people should, the people will, the people shall.
Right.
So let's start educating, and congratulations on the work you do to educate the public. But let's also start now pushing that responsibility so that, again, we are tracking which are the notorious roads. There's a time people are reporting and saying, here you cannot pass without, and actually taking videos. These days with technology, let's report, let's also take action. But most importantly, let's also stop, But then the police itself, in regards to the disciplinary action, what is the internal affairs unit doing when a police officer is reported over time, again and again, they're in the list of people who collect bribes?
Right. Good
question.
Why have we institutionalized bribery?
Indeed.
Why have we, so it's a systemic, you said it so well, it's systemic.
Right.
But we have to break these systems through a structure and a process.
Indeed.
And it all begins with one person.
Thank you.
Wangechi Kahuria is the Executive Director and Convener of the PRWGK. Thank you for being here with us this morning to have these conversations. That there needs to be an overhaul, and that's for sure. We won't stop talking about it. Thank you for being here this morning. For everybody who's been in the Situation Room this morning, thank you for being part of the conversation. We keep the conversations coming. Good morning. It is now